sometimes also called. Objectives راح نتكلم شوية عن ال upper and lower motor neurons. راح نتكلم عن ال pyramidal tracts اللي هم ال corticospinal and the corticobulbar tracts and their functions, and we're also going to talk about the extrapyramidal tracts. قبل ما نتكلم عن ال pyramidal tracts أو ال extrapyramidal tracts راح نتكلم عن ال areas of the brain that are concerned with the motor system. So تسمعوني؟ كويس. Okay, so pyramidal, areas that are concerned with the motor system are basically three main areas. فعندنا primary motor area أو اللي هي occupying the precentral gyrus here, if you see my cursor. This area is the main motor area. وفيها البيراميدال cells أو اللي اسمها PET cells. These cells are giant cells that sends down axons for the motor system. And we also have the supplementary motor area right in anterior to the primary motor area and medial to the premotor cortex. Here we have the premotor cortex. The premotor cortex has very important structures like the Broca's area for speech. I don't know if you took the speech lecture yet, but Broca's area is very important for speech and it formulates the speech. فلما يجيك واحد عنده problem in the Broca's area راح يكون عنده difficulty forming words. فيكون الإنسان يفهم and they're understanding what you're saying, but they're not able to form words to respond to it. It's called Broca's aphasia or non-fluent aphasia. وعندنا كمان area for the frontal eye movement. It's right above the Broca's area for speech. And then we have the head rotation area and the area for hand and skull. The head rotation area rotates the head لما يصير عندك أي شيء أي visual مثلا something that catches your eye, your head rotates to this area. This head rotation area is responsible for this head rotation. Now we're going to talk about the homunculus. قد شفتوا الهومونكولس قبل؟ ولا is this the first time that you see it? So if you've never heard of it, الهومونكولس هو representation of the body parts over the cortex. فعندنا هنا بالmotor cortex عندنا your tongue is here, your face is here, and then okay شفتوها قبل. Your hands are here, and then your legs are here. فهو يروح من superior in your body to inferior تحت ينزل to the medial side. Okay, وراح تلاحظون إنه مثلا here the hand is really big. ليش؟ لأن هي has more fine motor movement. فراح يكون الريبريزنتيشن حقها أكبر لأنه لها neurons أكثر من الليج مثلا. والفيس نفس الشيء لأنه في كثير neurons that are sent to the face. This is the homunculus. It's really important to understand عشان لو صار عندنا مثلا هو في عندهم different blood supply وراح تدرسوا blood supply بعدين. فمثلا this area has its own blood supply is separate from this area. فلما يكون عندنا problem here ويكون عندنا paralysis to the hand راح لو تكون هنا الarea اللي هي affected راح نعرف إنه which artery is being affected. بينما this area is different. So it's important to know where the hand versus leg is in the homunculus. طيب راح نتكلم شوية عن upper lower motor neuron. بالCNS في لها lecture كاملة we're just gonna briefly mention it. الupper motor neuron هو neurons cell bodies حقتها in the motor cortex here, okay, and they send the axons down, okay, and then until the spinal cord. لما توصل axons to their destination in the spinal cord, they will synapse with another neuron. Now this neuron is called the lower motor neuron, okay, اللي هو موجود بالanterior horn cell بالنسبة للmotor system. طيب why is it important to know the difference between lower and upper motor neuron؟ لأنه لما يكون عندنا مشكلة بالupper motor neuron, it's gonna present itself differently than the lower motor neuron. ومرة it's so important سواء بسنة ثانية أو بسنة ثالث راح نتكلم عنها كثير، تتكلمون عنها كثير بحياتكم الدراسية، اللي هو الديفرنس between the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron symptoms. لما تكون عندنا problem بالupper motor neuron راح يكون more spasticity، راح يكون more positive Babinski sign, while here it's the opposite. Okay, do you have any questions so far قبل ما نبدأ بالdescending tracts؟ Okay, so راح نتكلم عن descending tracts. We have we separate them to two parts: the pyramidal tract and the extrapyramidal tract. The pyramidal are the corticospinal and the corticobulbar tract, while the extrapyramidal are Rubrospinal, Reticulospinal, vestibulospinal, Tectospinal, and Olivospinal tracts. Pyramidal tracts, it's said that they're called pyramidal tracts because they form the pyramids in the medulla oblongata. That's why they're called the pyramidal tract. The extrapyramidal tract don't pass through the pyramids in the medulla oblongata. Okay, راح نتكلم أول عن البيراميدال اللي هو الcorticospinal corticobulbar tract, and it's the main talk, the main bulk of the lecture. الأوريجن حقها 30% من motor area 4 اللي هي primary motor area, 30% of the premotor area and the supplementary motor cortex, and 40% from the parietal cortex or the somatosensory cortex. فيجيها signals directly from the somatosensory area. ما أعرف إذا أخذتوا sensory tracts أو لا، بس إنه راح تتكلمون عن somatosensory area بالsensory tracts. now الباثوي حقها راح تروح من الكورتكس، من السيريبرال كورتكس هنا، وراح تنزل على الكورنر رادياتا. هي الاريا here that's called الكورنر رادياتا. تسوي شكلها كأنها radiation coming down، فيكون شكل that's why it's called the corner radiator. بعدين راح تروح للinternal capsule posterior limb of the internal capsule. بعدها راح تنزل للbrain stem اللي هو بالميد برين medulla oblongata والبونز. عندنا بالميدولا oblongata الكروسنج will happen، راح نتكلم عن هذا بعد شوي. الحين الcorticobulbar tract carries information to the motor neurons of the cranial nerve. This one is responsible for the cranial nerve, while this one is responsible for the other nerves lower than the cranial nerves. فالbody, the hands, legs, and so forth, and so on. Okay. Now we're going to talk about corticospinal tract. راح نفصلهم إلى lateral corticospinal tract and medial corticospinal tract, because one of them is lateral in the spinal cord and the other is medial. راح نرجع لهذه الصورة عشان أوريكم إياها. فعندنا هذا lateral corticospinal tract. If you notice, this is the area of lateral corticospinal tract, and the anterior corticospinal tract is here. Okay. فعندنا two corticospinal tracts depending on their location in the they're called lateral and anterior depending on their location in the spinal cord. هذه الصورة لازم تعرفوها كثير لأنه you're gonna need to know where these tracts are. Okay, فالlateral هو البigger tract. عندنا 80% of fibers are lateral corticospinal tract, اللي يميز اللاترال corticospinal tract عن الانتيريور corticospinal tract إنه they cross in the midline بالبيراميد. So الdecussation حقها أو الcrossing هو طبعا لما يطلع عندنا نيورون من هنا وينزل تحت، طيب يوصل عندنا بالنسبة للcorticospinal tract يوصل عندنا للمدلة oblongata، فإتس gonna cross يروح للجهة الثانية وينزل تحت. عشان كده دائما نقول إنه left area of the brain controls the right body و right area of the brain controls the left side of the body، لأنه يصير عندنا هذه decussation أو crossing ويروح it innervates a side of the body that is opposite to where it originates from. Okay, it's really important to know kill tract where does it cross. The crossing for each tract happens in different places than the other tracts. Why is it important؟ عشان لما يكون عندنا مثلا cut in the spinal tract، طيب لما يكون الcut هنا راح يكون affected side of the body وين لما يكون هنا الcut بهذا السايد. طيب so this is the left side of the body, the left side of the spinal cord، فراح يكون affected side of the body is the left body. بينما لما يكون هنا upper nearer to the brain الcut here on the right side of the brain كمان راح يكون on the left side of the body. So it's important to know where the crossing is عشان نعرف we can identify where the problem is happening لما يكون عندنا any problem in the tract. وراح يبين لكم هذه this idea بعدين لما تاخذون diseases that are concerned with motor tracts. It passes laterally in the spinal cord as I matter and ends directly. ما فيها interneurons لأنه بعض الtracts راح يكون فيها interneurons. we will discuss it later بالtract اللي فيها interneurons. It ends directly on the motor neuron anterior horn cell of the opposite side. Then peripheral. فالحين anterior horn cell هذه راح تطلع لنا lower motor neuron that will carry the motor impulses to the anterior horn to voluntary muscles. So voluntary muscle movement. The fibers passes laterally in the spinal cord white matter, so they control distal limb muscle. فالcontrol responsibility of the lateral corticospinal tract is the distal limb muscle. وهذه الأشياء كمان details هذه اللي هي which tract controls the distal limb muscle, which tract controls the fine movement, tract controls voluntary movement. هذه details are also important. الحين عندنا anterior or ventral corticospinal tract هو بس 20% of the fibers that are remaining and they do not cross in the medulla. So لو تلاحظون هذا هنا this is the lateral corticospinal tract اللي تكلمنا عنه قبل شوي. فهو يسوي هنا decussation in the pyramid or in the medulla. بينما anterior will descend on the same side ينزل بالspinal cord on the same side والcrossing حقته crossing to the other side راح يصير on the same level of the spinal cord اللي هو that innervates it. فهمتوا كيف؟ فمثلا احنا عندنا مثلا هذا النيورون responsible for the hand movement. فلما يوصل to the level of the hand movement مثلا نقول C3 C4 sorry T بالthoracic area أو كمان بالC اللي هو area that is controlling the hand من C6 until T1 sorry C5 until T1. فأني area هذه راح توصل هنا راح يسوي سينابسز مع انترنيورون. شفتوا هذا نيورون صغير هذا اسمه انترنيورون يكون بس موجود داخل السباينال كورد. بعد ما يسوي سينابسز مع الانترنيورون يروح يسوي سينابسز مع اللور موتور نيورون اللي هو بالانتيريور هورن سيل. هذا هنا synapses بعدين يطلع synapses here and then it goes and controls the muscle and it innervates the muscle. Okay, and it passes medially in the ventral horn and controls the axial and proximal limb muscle. فاللي يسوي لنا corticospinal tract اللي قبل lateral controls the distal limbs. It controls the movements of your hands, controls the movements of your legs. بينما this one the ventral هو للأكزيال and the proximal limb. controls مثلا the shoulders for the proximal limb. الأكزيال اللي هو your chest movement, your abdominal movement. So it's that's the difference between lateral and anterior. Okay, any question about the corticospinal tracts? Okay, no questions. We move on. Okay, الحين راح نتكلم عن functions of the corticospinal tract and the corticobulbar tract. First, the initiation of fine, discrete, skilled voluntary movement. And if you notice here, I made voluntary in bold. You will know why in we discuss the extrapyramidal tract. It's very important to know the pyramidal tract control the voluntary movement. Lateral corticospinal tract زي ما قلنا controls the distal muscles. فمثلا fingers, thumb, toes, concerned with the fine skilled movement. مثلا painting, writing, شيء يحتاج a lot of details. This is controlled by the lateral corticospinal tract. The anterior corticospinal tract controls the axial and the proximal muscle movement. And both tracts are involved in the stretch reflex, which facilitates the muscle tone through the gamma motor neurons. فعندنا sensory motor coordination by the fibers originating from the parietal lobe. هذه زي ما قلنا اللي شفتوا لما قلنا أنه 40% of the fibers originate from the somatosensory area. Somatosensory area هي موجودة بالparietal lobe عشان تسوي لنا sensory motor coordination. But this is also important. Corticobulbar tract controls the face, neck muscles and facilitates their tone and is involved with the facial expression, mastication and swallowing. Do you know what mastication is? Yes, mastication is chewing. فالcorticobulbar tract زي ما قلنا قبل إنه it's concerned with the with the cranial nerves. We'll say cranial nerves هي nerves that control these things اللي هي facial expression, mastication and swallowing. But that's the tracts that are concerned with these things. طيب عندنا dynamic versus static signals transmitted by the pyramidal tract. The dynamic neurons are excited at higher rate for shorter period of time. excitation حقها يجي جدا قوي, very high rate, but short period of time. بينما static are opposite. It's a slower rate but for a long period of time. فيخلي الكونتراكشن slower rate يخلي contraction longer. Now ايش الeffect of removal of the area pyramidalis of the primary motor cortex. طبعا الarea pyramidalis هي area 5 اللي فيها pyramidal cells اللي هي البت cells قلنا عنها قبل. loss of voluntary فيصير عندنا loss of voluntary control زي ما قلنا قبل شوي. So it's voluntary control of discrete movement of the limb, especially the hands and the fingers. Why? It's because the area pyramidalis is essential for voluntary initiation of finely controlled movements, especially in the hands and the fingers. And epipyramidal tracts. Any okay. Do you have any questions? I know it's overwhelming, this lecture. It's actually, for me at least, it's one of the rather harder lectures in CNS. بس لو تفهموها من الحين مرة راح تسهلوا على أنفسكم كثير. وآخر الليكتشر راح أعطيكم لينك أو QR code to a video that you watch will help you بعدين in the future. بس من الحين عشان لما يجي CNS تكونوا أنتم already فاهمين ال bulk concept in the motor tracts. Okay, راح نتكلم عن extrapyramidal tracts. Tracts اللي هم other than corticospinal tracts and are outside of the pyramid. They originate from area motor area 6, premotor area 6, motor area 4, sorry, and the premotor area اللي هي area 6 and the suppressor area. The pathway حقهم is different than البيراميدال. So لو تلاحظون راح يكون عندنا ال perspective area مثلا motor area 4 and then the corner radiata, the internal capsule and then the basal ganglia. Okay, it's important to know that the basal ganglia are involved in the extrapyramidal tracts. Why? Because لما نتكلم عن extrapyramidal symptoms and extrapyramidal diseases, they're mostly concerned with the basal ganglia, and diseases يعني sometimes they're referred to as diseases of the basal ganglia. وراح نتكلم عن واحد منهم briefly بعد شوي. الbrain stem, and then it goes to the brain stem and descends to the spinal cord. The function of the extrapyramidal tract is to set the postural background needed for performance of skilled movements and the control of subconscious cross movements. Why is it important to know the function of each system زي ما قلنا؟ لأنه if you lose the system you lose the function. if you see a problem مثلا in the subconscious cross movement, you will know إنه affected area is most likely the extrapyramidal system. Okay, the first extrapyramidal system is the Rubrospinal tract. The origin of all extrapyramidal system, just so you know, the main nucleus حقتهم is located always in the brainstem. فلما نقول الorigin حقها in the red nucleus, which is in the midbrain, the mesencephalon, this is the red nucleus, and that's why it's called the Rubrospinal tract, because Rubro is red, and I think it's in Greek. Rubro is red. That's why it's the red nucleus in the midbrain. Afferent, where does it receive? When يجينا afferent cells. Do you know the difference between afferent and afferent? Okay, good. So afferent, I like to remember it. And A is the first letter in the alphabet, but it's the first neurons اللي هو اللي داخله، بينما الافرنت هي اللي طالعه أو exit. E is exit. That's how I like to remember it. If that will help you remember it. فالافرنت حقتها اللي هو من ال primary motor cortex, will also receives afferent from the contralateral cerebellum and the basal ganglia. فيجيها شوفوا هنا cerebellum of the opposite side يجي يعطي afferent to the red nucleus, and also the corticospinal tract of the same side يعطي red nucleus, and the basal ganglia, it's not shown here, but it also gives afferent to the red nucleus in the midbrain. And then it descends. يصير لها decussation here on the same level in the midbrain. That's why it's important to know where the decussation happened. فراح يكون هنا decussation حقها وبتنزل on the opposite side. It will descend to the spinal cord on the opposite side, وبعدين تسوي synapses حقتها. Okay, الفانكشن حقتها هو discrete signals from the motor cortex to the spinal cord. فلما يكون عندنا مشكلة بالcorticospinal fibers, a discrete fine control of the fingers and the fingers are lost or impaired. Okay, why is it lost or impaired? لأنه corticospinal tract راح يعطيه هنا afferent here, وهو controls the fine movements. Rubrospinal tract controls the fine movements of the hands and the fingers. طيب, one more point. الحين عندنا هو, if you notice, it descends on the lateral side of the spinal cord. فعندنا lateral Rubrospinal tract and the lateral corticospinal tract اللي تكلمنا عنه قبل together sometimes we're called the lateral motor system because they're both on the lateral side of the spinal cord. فلما يكون عندنا lateral of course we have the medial motor system اللي هو vestibulo spinal tract. راح نتكلم عن vestibular tract just right now. Okay, this is now we'll talk about the vestibulospinal tract. الvestibulospinal tract الأوريجين حقها من vestibular nuclei and the pons زي ما قلنا. All of the extrapyramidal tracts originate from the brainstem. Sorry, الafferents حقتها receives input from the inner ear, vestibular apparatus in the inner ear and the cerebellum. فبما انها الانر ear والcerebellum we will يعني من الافرنس حقتها you will know الفانكشن حقها اللي هو control of posture, control of balance basically, or writing reflex. The pathway حقها axons descend in the ipsilateral ventral white matter of the spinal cord. It descends on the same side, ipsilateral means the same side, وبعدين راح يصير لها decussation later on. الجنرال فانكشن حقتها control posture and writing reflex. writing reflex هو لما مثلا يترك لما تتحكرفي وبعدين يصير عندك reflex سريع انه so you don't fall down. That's the writing reflex. It's excitatory to the ipsilateral spinal motor neuron and it controls the eye movements. So basically, it has a lot of responsibility to balance and posture. The extrapyramidal tract, vestibulospinal tract functions. عندنا two vestibulospinal tract, lateral originates from the lateral vestibular nucleus. That medial originates from the medial vestibular nucleus, both in the pons. Axons of the lateral vestibulospinal tract descends on the ventral white matter of the spinal cord, and the function is to mediate excitatory influences upon extensor motor neurons to maintain posture and writing reflex. طيب تعرفوا ايش هي extensor motor neurons؟ إذا أحد يعرف open your mic and share. اوكي ما حد يعرف. اوكي so الاكستنسور موتور نيورونز الحين احنا لما احنا واقفين when you're standing up دقيقة فالحين do you see me؟ اوكي الحين لما when you're standing up عندنا المسلز in the front of the thigh and the muscles in the back of the thigh, hamstrings and quads. Hamstrings هم extensors of the lower body. فهم they extend the lower body and they keep you standing. هم muscles that are responsible for keeping you up standing. فهذول هم اللي they contain extensor motor neuron. فهم maintaining the posture of the person and the writing reflex. فلما a patient has a problem in the hamstring, they have a hard time standing up. Okay, and that's why it's called the extensor motor neuron. will maintain the posture and the writing reflex. لو تلاحظون لما when you trip أو يصير شوية وتطيحين الhamstrings contract بقوة عشان تمسكي من إنك تطيحين. So this is the responsibility of the lateral vestibulospinal tract. أما medial vestibulospinal tract axons descend in the ventral white matter of the spinal cord and end in the cervical segment of the spinal cord. فهم بس يوصلوا للcervical area. Some fibers from part of the medial longitudinal fasciculus and the brainstem link the vestibular nuclei to the nuclei supplying the extraocular muscles. فهم responsible for the eye movement. Extraocular muscles, I don't know if you took them or not. هم المسلز اللي بالعين and they're responsible for the movement of the eye. Okay, so it's responsible for the coordination of head and eye movement. احنا زي ما قلنا قبل ال corticobulbar tract اللي تكلمنا عنه part of the pyramidal tract هو responsible for ال cranial nerves. The cranial nerves هم they supply the extra ocular muscle. Okay, فعندنا الميديال vestibular spinal tract راح يساعدنا باننا we link extraocular muscles of the eye that are being innervated by the cranial nerves with the head movement. Okay, فلما الانسان لما يجيك any فلما one person is talking to you to the right and then you look at them with your eyes and you also coordinate your head movement with the eye movement تلفي راسك معه. ف this is the responsibility of the medial vestibulospinal tract. Okay, now we'll talk about the tectospinal tract. The tectospinal tract comes from the superior colliculi of the midbrain. عندنا brain اللي هم superior and inferior, basically two superior and two inferior, and lateral motor neuron. طيب عشان remember which one is the superior and which one is the inferior. Superior, your eyes are do you hear me? هل انقطع صوتي بأي وقت؟ اوكي اوكي طيب دقيقة بس معلش. سمعتوني لما تكلمت عن التكتوسباينال تراكت اللي هو الفيجوال والاوديتوري ريفلكسز؟ اوكي راح اعيد هذا الجزء اللي هو Tectospinal tract. فهو it originates from the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. قلت لكم قبل ما ادري اذا سمعتوني او لا انه can you hear me? طيب اوكي بس معلش دقيقة. اوكي سوري ماي باد. راح اتكلم عن التكتوسباينال تراكت مره ثانيه. السوبيريور كوليكولاي هم الاوريجن حقها من السوبيريور كوليكولاي والانفيريور كوليكولاي of this of the mid brain. اوكي شكرا ساره. عندنا السوبيريور كوليكولاي والانفيريور كوليكولاي. السوبيريور كوليكولاي is responsible for the visual reflexes and the inferior colliculi is responsible for the auditory reflexes. How do you remember this? Remember in the eyes are higher up than the ears, visual is the superior and the auditory is the inferior. الفانكشن حقتها هو facilitating the head turning in response to visual or auditory stimuli. It also works with the vestibulospinal tracts اللي تكلمنا عنه قبل شوي. In turning the head to visual stimuli, and here we also talk about auditory stimuli. Okay, reticulospinal tract. عندنا two parts of the reticulospinal tract اللي هو the pontine or the medial reticulospinal tract that originates from the pontine reticular formation, the pons, which has high excitability, and they receive strong excitatory signals from the vestibular nucleus. Pathway حقها axons descend in the anterior right columns of the spinal cord, and the function is pontine. It increases the gamma efferent activity, so it's excitatory to the axial and anti-gravity extensor muscles, so it causes powerful excitation of anti-gravity muscles. الانتي muscles هم نفسهم المسلز اللي تكلمنا عنهم قبل شوي اللي هو extensors of the legs, لأنها it helps you stand up against gravity, but that's why they're called anti-gravity muscles اللي هم extensors of the body. Also axial muscles اللي هم muscles of the axial skeleton are also anti-gravity muscles, are also excitatory by the pontine reticulospinal tract. الother reticulospinal tract اللي هو medullary or the lateral corticospinal tract الorigin حقه من اسمه من from the medullary reticular formation, and axons descend in the lateral white column of the spinal cord. It receives strong input from the corticospinal tract and the rubrospinal tract, and it's inhibitory. It's important to know which one is inhibitory and which one is excitatory. The previous one, which is the pontine, is excitatory, and this one is inhibitory. So it counterbalances the excitatory signals from the pontine reticular system. So the medullary reticular system, the pontine reticular system, they work together عشان they balance out the excitatory signals versus the inhibitory signals to the anti-gravity extensor muscles. This one اللي هو medullary, it decreases the tone of the muscle, so it's inhibitory, while the other one increases the tone of the muscle. عندنا last one is the Olivospinal tract, and it arises from the inferior olivary nucleus in the medulla. It's only in the cervical region, and it has unknown function. في secondary olivocerebellar fibers transmit signals to multiple areas of the cerebellum, so it's also involved in the cerebellum, but overall أصلا nobody knows the function of it. في studies وفي studies عليها بس nothing is proven yet. Okay, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please do ask. I know it's a lot. This lecture is it's a huge bulk of physiology, CNS. One of the hardest lectures صراحة. الconcept حقها is hard to grasp. بس راح يكون إن شاء الله لو إذا درستوها أكثر من مرة صدقوني، يعني أهم شيء إنكم تدرسونها أكثر من مرة. This lecture, try to go over it time after time. كل مرة راح تكتشفون إنكم تفهمون أكثر وإنكم you get more information from the lecture. This video is the recommended video I told you about. If you cannot scan it, you can. I can send you the link for the video. Please يعني ask the coordinators and I will send the link. The video is a little bit above your level, في information شوية above your level that you will not need بس إنه it gives you a really good understanding of how these motor tracts work. فأنتم just take whatever you need from the video anything that is higher than your level you don't need to know it بس إنه مرة it's really helpful إنكم you watch videos on motor tracts and sensory tracts لأنها راح تفهمكم decussation راح تفهمكم the difference in areas of decussation لما يكون عندنا cut in the spinal cord above the area of decussation lower than the area of decussation إيش راح يصير. هذه الأشياء مرة مهمة وراح تاخذون عليها أمراض معينة راح تكون related to these things. قبل شوي قلت لكم إني راح أقول لكم عن الإكسترابيراميدال tract. عندنا أشياء نسميها extrapyramidal symptoms اللي هو symptoms اللي تطلع لما يكون عندنا problem بالإكسترابيراميدال tract. Do you know any disease that is an extrapyramidal that has extrapyramidal symptoms or it's a disease of the basal ganglia? فإحنا قلنا it controls الفاين movement الفاين involuntary movement. فلما يكون عندنا loss of the fine involuntary movement إيش راح يصير عندنا؟ لما يكون عندنا loss of the involuntary fine movement راح يكون الجسم كله يرعش فراح يكون عندنا الشلل الرعاشي أو Parkinson disease. Yes, Parkinsonism are the symptoms of Parkinson disease which related to basal ganglia. صح يا ما شاء الله. Good to know إنه في أحد يعرف. وإن شاء الله راح تتعلمونها مع in CNS راح تتعلموا كل هذه الأشياء. You will this is the extrapyramidal symptoms and the extrapyramidal tract is the tract affected by the extrapyramidal symptoms. Okay, so if you want to watch this video, it's a mid-ed video, it's motor tract. It's gonna be helpful. If you have any question, please do ask. Otherwise, alhamdulillah, we're done.